The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped between credit card offers and luxury catalogs that Richard Hammond never bothered to open himself. But this one was different. Certified mail, government seal. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Expensive cognac from the night before still heavy in his bloodstream. 3 words jumped out at him like a punch to the gut: notice of removal proceedings. And there, typed in cold, bureaucratic font, was his granddaughter's name. Alina Marie Hammond, age 12, subject to immediate deportation to Mexico within 60 days. Richard dropped the letter. It fluttered to the marble floor of his study like a dying bird. This couldn't be real. This had to be a mistake. He'd spent $50 million making sure people like this, illegal immigrants, anchor bobbies, whatever the politically correct term was, he'd spent $50 million making sure they went back where they came from. But Alina, his Alina, the little girl who called him Pops and made him laugh for the first time since his wife died. The phone was already in his hand, punching his son's number with shaking fingers. If you want to see how this billionaire's world completely falls apart, make sure you're subscribed to Yanni Story TV. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. David picked up on the first ring. His voice was hollow, already broken. "Dad, I was about to call you." "What the hell is this, David? What is this letter?" Richard's voice cracked, something that hadn't happened since he buried his wife 3 years ago. Silence, then his son's breathing, ragged and wrong. "Can you come over, please? We need to talk in person." 20 minutes later, Richard sat in his son's living room in Greenwich, a house he'd bought them as a wedding gift 8 years ago. David and Maria sat across from him on the couch, holding hands like they were bracing for impact. Maria's eyes were red and swollen. She'd been crying for hours, maybe days. "Tell me this is a mistake," Richard said. "Tell me the government screwed up the paperwork." Maria spoke first, her voice quiet but steady. "It's not a mistake, Richard. I came here when I was 7 years old. My parents brought me across the border from Guadalajara. I grew up in Los Angeles, went to UCLA, became a pediatric surgeon. I saved lives, I paid taxes. I did everything right except I couldn't fix the one thing that mattered. I was never legal." The room tilted. Richard gripped the armrest of the leather chair, the same chair he'd sat in last Thanksgiving, watching Alina perform a piano recital she'd practiced for months. "DACA," Maria continued. "I had DACA protection, but President Stone's new executive order, the one you helped fund, it ended DACA retroactively. No appeals, no exceptions, and the new interpretation of birthright citizenship, it means Alina loses her citizenship too because I was undocumented when she was born." "That's insane," Richard said. That's not what I wanted. You're a doctor, you save children's lives." David's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You funded this, Dad. You gave Senator Stone $50 million. You stood on stages and talked about anchor bobbies and illegal criminals. You said people like Maria were destroying America. Well, congratulations, you got exactly what you paid for." Richard stood up, packing now, his mind racing through solutions. Money, lawyers, connections. He hadn't built a $10 billion fortune by accepting defeat. "I'll call Marcus, President Stone. We go way back. He'll fix this." "Will he?" Maria asked softly. "Because his press secretary said yesterday that they're expediting removals for high-profile cases. They want to make examples of people. Your public support made this happen, Richard. They're not going to give you special treatment. That would make them look weak." Richard pulled out his phone anyway, dialing numbers he had on speed dial. His personal attorney first. Gerald Fishman, the best immigration lawyer money could buy. Gerald answered with his usual efficiency. "Richard, I was expecting your call." "Fix this, Gerald, I don't care what it costs." A heavy sigh on the other end. "I can't. I've looked at the executive order from every angle. It's airtight. The president has broad discretionary authority on immigration enforcement. And the new citizenship interpretation, it's constitutionally dubious, but it'll take years to work through the courts. Your daughter-in-law and granddaughter don't have years, they have 58 days. Richard hung up without saying goodbye. He called the White House next. Got as far as a senior aide who promised someone would return his call. They never did. He tried Senator Morrison, an old friend from Yale. "I'm sorry, Richard, but I can't be seen interfering with enforcement actions. The political optics are terrible." 3 more calls, 3 more dead ends, each no landing heavier than the last. That evening, Richard sat in Alina's room while she did her homework. Algebra, she was good at it, better than he'd ever been. Her walls were covered with posters of Taylor Swift and acceptance letters from a summer science program at MIT for gifted kids, a program she'd never get to attend now. "Pops, can I ask you something?" Elena looked up from her textbook, her brown eyes so much like her mother's. "Anything, sweetheart." "Mom said we might have to move to Mexico, but I don't speak Spanish very good, and I don't know anyone there. Why do we have to go?" Richard's throat closed up. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that her grandfather helped destroy her life? It's complicated, Elena. Is it because of Mom, because she wasn't born here? Yes. But that's not fair. She didn't choose to come here as a kid, and I was born in Connecticut. At Yale Hospital, you were there. You held me when I was like 2 hours old. You told me that story 100 times. I know, baby, I know. So why do the rules say I'm not American? I've never even been to Mexico. This is my home. Richard couldn't answer. He just pulled her into a hug while she cried into his shoulder, her thin body shaking with sobs she was trying to hold back to be brave. The next morning, Richard got his meeting with President Stone. It took every favor he had, every connection, every ounce of leverage. They met in the Oval Office, just the two of them. Marcus Stone looked different behind the resolute desk. Harder, colder. "Richard, good to see you," Stone said, not getting up, "though I imagine this isn't a social call." "Marcus, we've known each other for 15 years. I've supported you from the beginning. I'm asking you, as a friend, make an exception for my family." Stone leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You know I can't do that. We ran on a platform of no exceptions, no amnesty, no special treatment for anyone. Your granddaughter's situation is exactly what we campaigned against. Birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants. It's a loophole we're closing. She's 12 years old, Marcus. She's an American kid, straight a student. She wants to be a doctor like her mother." Her mother broke the laws. Her mother was 7. The law doesn't care about age, Richard, you know that. You funded ads that said exactly that. No exceptions means no exceptions, even for billionaire donors. Stone's smile was thin and political. "If I give your family a pass, what message does that send? That the rules are different for rich people, we'd be crucified." Richard felt something break inside him. "So that's it, you're going to deport my granddaughter to score political points? I'm going to enforce the law that you paid to help me enact. Don't come in here acting betrayed. You knew exactly what you were supporting." The meeting lasted 4 more minutes. Richard left the White House feeling older than his 68 years. 2 weeks passed in a blur of failed legal motions and desperate phone calls. Richard barely slept. He'd sit in his study until 3 in the morning, researching immigration law on his laptop like some law school student looking for loopholes that didn't exist. Then Maria invited him to the hospital. "I want you to see something," she said. He met her at Connecticut Children's Medical Center, where she'd worked for 6 years. She took him to the observation deck above an operating room. Below, Maria stood over a tiny patient, maybe 5 years old, her hands moving with impossible precision. "Congenital heart defect," the attending nurse explained to Richard. "The parents were told by 3 other surgeons it was inoperable. Dr. Hammond is the only one willing to try. She's been in there for 7 hours." Richard watched his daughter-in-law save that child's life, watched her refuse to give up when the monitors screamed warnings, watched her make impossible decisions with steady hands. 3 hours later, the little boy was stable. The parents sobbed with relief. In the hallway after, still in her scrubs, Maria looked exhausted and somehow peaceful. "That's the 43rd child I've saved with that particular procedure. I developed the technique myself, published papers on it. Surgeons from Johns Hopkins call me for advice." She met Richard's eyes. "And in 41 days I'll be in Mexico City, where my credentials mean nothing and I'll probably never practice medicine again. Those kids, the ones who need me, they'll just die. Because they're American doctors, can't do what I do." Richard had no words. "I don't hate you, Richard," Maria said quietly. "I know you didn't know about me. David wanted to tell you when we got engaged, but I was afraid you'd reject us. So we hid it. That's on me too, but I need you to understand something. When you funded those campaigns, when you gave those speeches about illegal criminals and anchor bobbies, you weren't talking about statistics. You were talking about people, about me. About 7-year-old me holding my mother's hand crossing the desert because my father heard there were jobs in Los Angeles. About teenage me studying until 2 a.m. because I knew I had to be twice as good to get half as far. About the me who took an oath to save lives and has done exactly that for 6 years. She walked away, leaving Richard standing in that hospital corridor, feeling like he was seeing clearly for the first time in years. The breaking point came on a Wednesday. Richard woke up to his phone exploding with notifications. Someone had leaked the story. Billionaire Richard Hammond's family faces deportation under policies he funded. It was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, Twitter was on fire. His own words from campaign rallies played on loop, talking about anchor bobbies and chain migration, now juxtaposed with family photos of Alina. The comments were vicious from both sides. The left called him a hypocrite who only cared when it affected him personally. The right called him a traitor for trying to get special treatment. Death threats poured in, not against him, against Maria and Alina. David called him furious. "They're outside our house, Dad." Reporters, protesters. "Someone threw a brick through Alina's window last night. She's terrified." That did it. Richard Hammond had built an empire by being ruthless and strategic. But watching his granddaughter suffer while the world he'd helped create tore her apart, something fundamental shifted. He called a press conference for the next morning. His PR team begged him not to. His board of directors threatened to remove him as CEO. He didn't care. The room was packed with cameras and reporters. Richard stepped to the podium, no notes, no teleprompter, just him and his guilt. "My name is Richard Hammond and I was wrong." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. 2 months ago, I thought I understood immigration. I thought it was about borders and laws and protecting American workers. I thought people who came here illegally were criminals who didn't respect our country. I was wrong about all of it. He told them about Maria, about watching her save a child's life, about Alina crying because she didn't understand why her home country didn't want her. "I gave $50 million to President Stone because I believed his rhetoric. I stood on stages and repeated talking points about anchor bobbies without ever once thinking about what those words meant. An anchor baby, that's my granddaughter. That's a 12-year-old girl who plays piano and wants to be a doctor and has never lived anywhere except Connecticut. She's not an anchor, she's not a baby. She's Alina, and she's being ripped away from the only home she's ever known because people like me reduced human lives to political talking points." Reporters shouted questions. Richard ignored them. "I'm announcing today a $100 million fund for immigration legal defense. I'm divesting from any company involved in detention or deportation. And I'm publicly calling on President Stone to grant clemency to DACA recipients and their families. What we're doing is cruel, it's un-American, and I helped make it happen. That's something I'll have to live with forever." The press conference lasted 40 minutes. Richard answered every question honestly, even the ones that made him look terrible, especially those. President Stone's response came within hours. A terse statement from the White House: "The administration does not negotiate with political pressure. Enforcement will continue as planned." 30 days left? Richard tried everything. He filed lawsuits that were dismissed. He lobbied Congress members who smiled sympathetically and did nothing. He appeared on news shows, gave interviews, burned every bridge he'd built in conservative politics. Nothing worked. 2 weeks before the deportation date, Richard sat with his son and daughter-in-law in their kitchen. Alina was upstairs packing, actually packing her life into suitcases. "I bought a building in Mexico City," Richard said. "Medical facility, top-of-the-line equipment. Maria, you can practice there. I've already contacted the licensing board." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Richard, you don't have to." "I'm not done. I enrolled Alina in the American School of Mexico City, best international school in the country, and I'm coming with you." David looked up sharply. "What?" "I'm selling the Connecticut house. I'll keep a small apartment here for business, but I'm moving to Mexico City. 6 months a year minimum, more if you'll have me. I can't fix what I did, I can't undo the damage, but I can make sure you're not alone." They cried together, the three of them, mourning what could have been. The airport scene was worse than Richard imagined. He'd chartered a private plane to spare them the humiliation of commercial travel. Alina clutched her stuffed bear, the one she'd had since she was 3. Maria was stoic, comforting her daughter. David looked destroyed. Airport security was there anyway. Immigration officials to verify the deportation was completed. One of them, a young officer who couldn't have been more than 25, looked sick about the whole thing. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Alina as he checked her papers. "This isn't right." Alina just nodded, too scared to speak. Richard held his granddaughter one more time. I love you, Alina, and I promise you I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure this never happens to another kid. I promise. I love you too, Pops. Will you really visit? Every single month. You won't get rid of me that easy. The plane took off at sunset. Richard watched from the terminal until it disappeared into the clouds. 6 months later, Richard Hammond sat in a cafe in the Roma Norte neighborhood of Mexico City. Alina was across the street at school, visible through the window, laughing with friends. Her Spanish was getting better. She still missed Connecticut, probably always would, but she was adapting, resilient in the way kids are. Maria's clinic was thriving. She'd already performed 3 surgeries that saved children Mexican doctors had deemed hopeless. Word was spreading. Richard's phone buzzed, an email from another billionaire, someone who donated to the same campaigns. Subject line, my nephew just got his deportation notice. Richard smiled grimly and started typing. Let me tell you what I learned. His life looked nothing like it had a year ago. He'd lost friends, political allies, even some business partners. His net worth had dropped $2 billion from the legal fees and the fund he'd established. Conservative media called him a traitor daily. But every Sunday he had dinner with his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter in their apartment overlooking Chapultepec Park. Alina would tell him about school, about her new friends, about the quinceañera she was already planning even though she was only 12. Maria would share stories from the clinic. David was learning to paint, something he'd always wanted to try. It wasn't the life Richard had planned. It was smaller, quieter, farther from power. It was also the first time in decades he felt like he was doing something that actually mattered. Before we end, if this story moved you, if it made you think about immigration differently, do me a favor. Subscribe to Yanni Story TV, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because stories like Alina's are happening right now to real families, and the only way we change things is by paying attention, by caring, by remembering that behind every policy, every law, every political debate, there are actual human beings whose lives hang in the balance. Richard Hammond learned that lesson the hardest way possible. The question is, will we learn it before it's too late? Thanks for watching Yanni Story TV.